So here we are with my friend Jonathan Winbush, who is an amazingly talented motion graphics and 3D artist. He is also the guy to go to for all of your Cinema 4D to Unreal Engine integration as it relates to motion graphics. He is doing a bang-up job on his YouTube channel with all that kind of wonderful information. And with the upcoming release of Unreal 5, there's a lot of interest in that, especially with the motion graphics community. So he's got an amazing YouTube channel with a lot of wonderful tutorials on there. I'll put a link in the description below, so definitely go check that out. He is also the owner of Winbush Immersive. Jonathan, tell us about Winbush Immersive. What is that? What do you do? Tell us about yourself.
I started Winbush Immersive maybe 5 years ago, I think. It's right when I moved down. Well, actually, right before I moved down here to Orange County. I'm in Laguna Niguel. But it came out of, I was working at Warner Brothers for a few years there, and there was just, it was a wonderful place to work at, but just trying to work up the ladder, you kind of just like hit that ceiling at some point. Yeah. It's like I kept wanting to strive for more. And so I was like, why don't I just work for myself? Then, the ceiling is limitless. So I started Winbush Immersive. I do work in motion graphics. I've done virtual reality, and then been diving into interactive stuff, like you were saying, with Unreal Engine, and just really pushing the limits. If it has this screen, I'm basically doing work for it.
So now you said that you worked at Warner Brothers. How did you get your start? Where did you start out?
I started off at Happy Madison. That's where I started my internship at. I went to the Art Institute. I'm from Pittsburgh, PA originally. So I went to the Art Institute of Pittsburgh. I got my bachelor's degree in science there. And then from there, I just sent my demo reel out to every studio that I could find online in Hollywood. And just magically enough, Adam Sandler's assistant is from Pittsburgh as well. And so she opened up my envelope just because she saw it, and she saw the Pittsburgh address on there. And so that made her want to open up the package. Nice. And then they saw my reel. And so they gave me a call, and they were just like, we saw you work. If you're ever in town, hit us up. We're always looking for a junior artist, and we really like your work. So I was just like, I could come out there tomorrow. And they're like, why aren't you still in Pittsburgh? And I was like, but if there's a job opportunity, I'm more than willing to jump out there. And they're just like, oh, no. If you're in town, just look us up. We'd be happy to talk. So just on a chance, I just, I think it was around income tax time. I spent like my entire income tax check, bought a red-eye flight out to Los Angeles, and just showed up at the doorstep that next morning, just in the only suit I had was like this cheap suit I had from Burlington. But it's like, always got to try to put your best foot forward.
Oh, I know.
I'm sitting there at the doorstep with a suit on, and they came and they're like, Jonathan Winbush? I'm just like, and there's no interview, and they're just like, okay, you got it. We'll give you an internship. So
I was gonna say that I almost kind of had to with you just showing up on the doorstep there.
Yeah. So it was great because I did 6 months there interning, and then I guess they liked me enough to offer me like a full-time junior position there. So I worked there for another couple of years before I went freelancing around Los Angeles and tried out the freelance scene for a little bit. Nice.
I heard I met an editor who was from Indiana, and he wanted to move out to Los Angeles, and so he was similarly kind of sending out his resume and his reel to a bunch of different places, but he very specifically took his address off of his resume, so they thought that he was already out here. So when they would call him back for an interview or whatever, they didn't think about the fact that he was in Indiana because they didn't know that he was in Indiana. But he ended up they ended up hiring him for a show, and he literally just flew out here to work on the show, and I think eventually moved his family out after the show was over because he got another gig after that. So everything just kind of snowballed into that. I
guess that was a smarter way of going about it.
Well, no, I don't know. Yeah. I actually kind of really like your story. I like the idea of and if I was working there as well too, I would have been kind of like, oh man, this guy is intense. He's real. We want him because there's something about that passion that is kind of addictive, and you want to be on your team, which you kind of exhibited by the fact that you literally hopped on a plane and came out there and said, here I am.
Yeah.
So
you want to hear a crazier story than that?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. Before that even happened, that was like 6 months after I graduated. So right after I actually graduated, I was sending out my reel to a bunch of studios in Los Angeles, like just going on the MoGraph.net forums and just kind of going through the list there. And I can't think of the name of the studio. It's maybe Four Wall or something. I can't remember. But they had called me and offered me like a junior position.
Okay.
And I was like, oh, yeah, sure, that'd be great. And so I actually packed up my car, drove across the country because I was supposed to start that following Monday.
Right.
I think it was a Thursday that I left. And then when I went, long story short, when I went to the job site, the place was completely empty. Nothing was in the studio at all. So I'm like, I'm devastated because I don't know what's going on. I'm hitting the door, I'm pounding on the door, and I'm looking in the windows and I'm not seeing anything because it's dark.
Right.
And then somebody finally came out from like one of the places next to it, and they're like, what are you doing? We've been seeing you out here for like a half hour, like knocking on his door and, like making phone calls. And I'm like, yeah, I was supposed to start this job today. And they're like, oh, we saw these people moving out over the weekend. Like, we don't think anybody's there. And I was like, I was supposed to start today. Nobody gave me a notice or anything. So, yeah, I still, to this day, have never heard back from this guy at all.
Well, how many years? I mean, how many years ago was that? That was,
That was 2006. So, yeah, I just, I packed up my stuff and drove all the way back to Pittsburgh and went back to the drawing board from there.
So, as a kid, was there anything that inspired you or that made you kind of want to do what you do now as a career?
As far back as I can remember, like I remember my mom taking me to see Toy Story at the movie theaters when that first came out. I can't remember how old I was. I know I was still a child, and that I'd never seen anything like that before, as in 3D animation. So that blew me away. But I mean, I could say that was an influence, but I never gave it a second thought after that. Not until maybe I was a little bit older in my teenage years when I saw The Matrix, the first one. Okay. And I saw that in the theaters, and that blew me away. Just all the visual effects at the time and everything was mind blowing. And we'd never seen anything like that done before. And so that kind of piqued my interest, but not to the point to where I was like, okay, I want to do that. It wasn't until I actually applied for school at the Art Institute. Like, I've been a gamer all my life, and I originally wanted to go in for game art, and I can't draw for a lick. So they looked at my portfolio and they're just like, yeah, we can't accept you in the game art program, but we did just start this motion graphics program maybe like a semester ago, so it's still brand new. Can we interest you in that? And then maybe you can still work on your portfolio and transfer over. And so I took the studio tour of the school, and they had like this beautiful green screen facility in the basement. Nice. And they were actually recreating shots from The Matrix on that green screen. And then when I saw that, I'm like, this is the type of stuff you guys are doing here. And they're like, oh yeah, we're trying to recreate, like the VFX in The Matrix. And I was like, okay, sign me up. Cause there you go. That's exactly what, I didn't even know this stuff was available to,
is this
like us.
Is this this is the Art Institute in Pittsburgh?
Yeah.
Wow. Can't even talk. Pittsburgh? Yeah. Okay. So this isn't, okay. So this is, now they're not affiliated with the Art Institute of Chicago, are they?
It's all one big family.
It is all. Okay. Mm-hmm. So do you think, so you definitely went to school for motion graphics, and I'm assuming you took some design classes as well too. Do you think that in 2020 that going to school is important? Do you think getting a degree in design or motion graphics or 3D animation is important now?
Yeah, that's the $1 million question, because my son who just graduated, he's dealing with that dilemma as well, because he does, like, I'm still paying off my school loans. Like, it just seems like a never ending pitfall, and he sees that in me, and he's like, I don't want to take on that type of responsibility financially at this young age.
God bless him. He's got a good father.
I mean, granted, my situation was different because I had my son at 19, 20 years old. Right. And so, like, even though I had grants and stuff like that, I'm trying to raise a child and go to school and go to work full time and all that stuff. So, yeah, I mean, and then when I was interning, I was getting paid, but it wasn't that much. So I didn't pay on my school loans for like the first year, and that just accumulated. It was just a snowball effect of stuff happening. But I told him, I'm like, if you're more organized and, you know, you got your stuff together, you probably won't have the same,
correct,
you know, financial issues that
correct.
I had. But he doesn't want to have any type of loans or anything out at this age. And then just talking to different artists, especially now,
right?
It's just like a lot of them are self-taught.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, all the stuff you're seeing on, you know, Instagram and on the forums and Facebook, like a lot of these kids are just self-taught. They just have a passion for it. And so I don't know if you really need like a traditional 4-year school like I went to, but, you know, maybe taking like a course online, like any type of beginner courses or anything of that nature probably can't hurt, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I've often said, because I have people ask me if they need to go to film school to get into the film industry, and the honest answer is, I mean, no, you don't have to. Quentin Tarantino is a perfect example. I mean, he never went to Steven Spielberg never went to film school.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Now George Lucas went to USC. Francis Ford Coppola went to USC. John Carpenter went to USC. So USC actually has a lot of, you know, high profile grads, but you know, Spielberg, talked his way onto the back lot of a movie studio, and, you know, kind of, you know, got his learning done in that regard. And so I've often told people, well, you don't have to, but you know, if it depends. I mean, if you're a motivated person, if you're motivated to just make things and make movies. I mean, there was those, I think, brothers or friends in Africa who were making visual effects, short films and stuff like that. I mean, come on. I mean, the quality of the stuff that they were doing was phenomenal.
Actually, shout out to Main Gear. Yeah, because they actually sent them computers after that came out online. They sent them out computers to help those kids out.
I didn't realize that. That's really cool. But you know, so I have often said, you know, if you're going to write, if you're going to edit, if you're going, whatever it is that you want to do, that, I mean, that's the advice that I mostly give, you know, anybody who asks, is you need to figure out what you want to do. Because, and you might attest to this, you know, the entertainment industry does a very good job of pigeonholing you into a very specific job. So don't spend time trying to get into something that you don't want to do. I went to school for cinematography. I took some editing classes in film school as well too. But when I moved out to California, I thought I wanted to be a studio executive. So I was in the studio system for 7 years, and until I finally realized this is really not for me. I need to get back into production and post-production and start doing that. But I kind of found my way into motion graphics, and people started hiring me to do motion graphics and started enjoying it. And I was like, I mean, I give a huge shout out to people like John Dickinson and Harry Frank and even Andrew Kramer to a certain extent. Had it not been for Harry Frank and John Dickinson and all their training and stuff like that, I probably wouldn't have a career in motion graphics now. That being said, I certainly miss the actual filmmaking side of things. I miss editing, I miss directing, I miss cinematography and doing camera stuff and all that kind of stuff. So I kind of find myself going back to doing that or wanting to do more of that. But I always tell people, figure out what you want to do first and concentrate and focus on doing that, because chances are you're going to get stuck into some kind of a hole where it's going to be difficult to get out, especially when you start having a family with kids and stuff like that. It just makes it that much harder to kind of go about doing what you want to do.
I always say passion goes a long way as well.
Agreed.
I think out of my graduation class, only myself and my friend Mike were the only ones that actually got jobs in motion graphics. Like, there was a whole bunch of kids that graduated, but they didn't have that drive to take it the next step after graduation. Like, a lot of people just think, hey, I got my degree, where's my job at? And it's like, that's just the beginning. And so even, like my first job that I had, like some of my mentors there, they didn't, like my friend Dan Pierce, he came over here from Australia and he was self-taught. and it's like we took the same path. We took different paths to get to the same place. But he had that motivation and drive that got him into that same place that got me into going to school. And so it's just all about, your dedication to your craft and what you really want to do, because I was shining through.
Well, you hit the nail on the head right there, and you made me actually remember too. So I went to Columbia College in Chicago. That's where I went to film school. I visited USC in '92, I think it was, and I was just way too intimidated. Being from a small town, Tulsa, Oklahoma, I was way too intimidated to be in Los Angeles. So I chickened out and I didn't even apply to USC. But when I eventually did go to film school, I went to Columbia College in Chicago. And I'm thankful that I did that, because that was a much better transition from Tulsa to Chicago and then to Los Angeles. But that being said, one of the reasons I went to Columbia College was they had a career counselor that I saw give a speech or something like that, or whatever it was, and he was talking about how all these graduates are working for Spielberg and for doing this and doing that, and I got, I bought the sales pitch hook, line, and sinker. Yeah. And then I go through film school and I go to his office to say, okay, I want to go work for Spielberg. And he's like, okay, there are some books over there, go do it yourself. Basically, yeah, it was up to me to figure out how I was going to get out to Los Angeles. And I made a list of all of the places that I wanted to do an internship at. And I literally cold called, because email wasn't really a thing back then. It was, but it was virtually non-existent. Nobody had it. And I actually, probably about a dozen of the places that I called, half of them called me back. The reality is, most places want free labor. Now, most internships now are paid, and that has a lot to do with just how interns were abused in terms of labor issues and whatnot. But, that's how I had to get out to Los Angeles. I didn't have somebody do it for me. I had to do it. And so I think you hit the nail on the head right there. As passion goes a long way in moving you forward in terms of what you want to do.
Even if you go to school, you still need it.
Right,
I know a lot of people that, they graduated and then they blame the schooling system for not getting a job afterwards. And just it's like the same thing. I fell for the whole hook, line, and sinker. Yes. Whenever you go through orientation at school, our graduates worked at Nickelodeon and all these places. Yep. So you get amped up, and then when you graduate, you go to your counselor. Yeah. He's like, okay, I want to work at Nickelodeon. And he's like, oh, go ahead, go apply. So it's like they're really no help at all, because they really don't have the contacts that they say they do. Yeah. But honestly, it's up to you anyway to kind of pursue where you want to go.
It is. So what's the next question? Oh, here it is. Sorry.
No worries.
What's the best career advice that you would give to somebody? If somebody, if you were giving some advice to somebody, what would you say, career-wise?
I would say whenever you go in, no matter what your skill set is, always strive to be the best person that you are. Like a lot of times, I know myself, a lot of people tell me oh, you're lucky to be doing what you're doing. Right. And I 100% don't believe in luck at all. I always feel like, there's certain different destinies that you can achieve to, and how, whatever one you fall upon, that's all up to you. Right. So I tell people, even if I am lucky, I worked hard to put myself in a position to take advantage of that luck that came across. So if I didn't work hard, I would have never met so-and-so, or somebody wouldn't have saw me. If I was just sitting here doing nothing, twiddling my thumbs, how are people supposed to discover you, or how are people supposed to even know about you? Right. So I just say work hard and definitely put yourself out there. Don't do like I did and be scared for years and not put yourself out there. Especially in this day and age, you have to put yourself out there, because it's all about visibility and standing out from the crowd. And
it's interesting that you say that too, because my son, just finished his first grade, and I was blown away. It was night and day different, obviously, because he went to a different school for kindergarten. But in first grade, every week they're having to speak in front of the class. They're having to do public speaking, and I was like, wow. First of all, that's crazy that a first grader has to do that. But more so, I was kind of like, you know what? No, that's actually good, because that's conditioning him right now at an early age to essentially have that confidence to be able to kind of go get what you need to get, and also to communicate, which are two very important things.
Especially this day and age, because everybody's so used to being online that they're not used to talking to people at all. So it's like, oh my gosh, this generation is really, really awkward right now. Like my next door neighbor, he's a sound engineer at this agency down in Carlsbad, and he was telling me about some of the interns that they've been getting lately. He's like, they can't communicate face to face. Like, he'll tell them something and they gave him a blank stare. Yeah. But if he texts them, like if he text messaged them, they're like right on it. So it's like, everybody's so used to communicating through these devices that they've lost the ability to like speak to like other humans. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I had a job earlier this year with a social media department of a company, and and all of the people in the social media department were all, kind of millennial age type people. And I kid you not, I mean, it was like, having a phone conversation and getting them to communicate and tell me what they wanted. It was like pulling teeth sometimes. and on top of that, we had Slack, we had, there were 3 different places where they were giving notes on things, and everybody had a say so and everything. And I was like, it was utterly mass confusion. And you really don't understand, especially in the motion graphics, especially when you're going to school. If you're going to school, you don't really understand how important it is for you to be able to communicate, as well as being able to help your client or whoever you're working with communicate that message to you, because sometimes that's also what's required too, is you have to know the right questions to ask. Well, I'm putting myself on the spot in terms of trying to think of some questions to ask a potential client, but you understand what I'm talking about.
I mean, that's a big reason I've worked for myself, was because a lot of times you're dealing with producers that are then, relaying notes from the client. Yes. And so it's almost like a game of phone. Yeah. Like the client is relaying the notes to the producer or art director or whatever, which in turn is kind of manipulating that and then giving the notes to you. And so you handle those notes, give it back, and then the client's like, that's not what I asked for.
Exactly.
So it's like, there's that middle ground communication in there. And I'm like, can you just let me talk to the client and ask what they're looking for? And because it's just like that communication is key. You can't have that middle barrier sometimes there.
I worked at a company where every executive, when they had a writer on a particular project, and every executive gave their own notes to that writer, and sometimes one executive would contradict another executive, and it's like, well, wait a minute, that guy's the head of the company, so maybe I need to listen to him, but I don't know, this girl is the one signing my checks, maybe I need to listen to her. It's like, so I was gonna say I felt bad for the writer, but I didn't, because they were also making six figure salaries on these jobs and stuff like that. So but it's certainly something that you have to be aware of when you're kind of getting into this. And I'm sure to a certain extent it exists in most other industries as well too. But what's the best life advice? What's the best career and life advice that you've ever gotten?
The best career advice came from Method Man a long time ago. This is pre-YouTube. I used to have a hip hop show called The Breakdown TV, and we used to interview
not know about
different hip hop artists. I'm sorry, what was that?
How did I not know about this?
No, probably never brought it up. but
it's the first time I've ever heard you mention Method Man either. So.
Oh yeah, I'll send you a link, because it later came out on YouTube later on. But,
sorry, I'm taking a drink.
And got like millions of hits and everything, which is crazy. But yeah, I mean, the advice there that he said was a lot of artists, they focus on the money and they lack in their art. Yeah. But if they would focus more on the art, then the money would come, which is basically saying like a lot of artists, they're out there just, they see these artists making a lot of money. And so they're striving for that instead of, just really honing down on the basics. And once you get a basic understanding of how art works and how to make good art, then eventually the money will come in because people will recognize the art, and that's what they're striving for.
I like that because that translates not to, I mean, that it transcends, art forms, because it's not just specific to music. I used to have a roommate who was an amazing writer. He was an awesome writer, and he wrote a really, really good script, but it was a pirate script, and it was, it's like, I was like, God, man, dude, I can count on one hand how many pirate movies they are, and they're all the same franchise. I mean, it's going to be a really hard sell, and you should think about something else, or you should think about another concept. And he would come up with these concepts that he thought would sell. Okay, well, this movie did this and this movie did that. I'm like, yeah, but you know what? I don't feel it. It feels like you're trying to force a story in this, and so you're not focusing on the story itself. You're trying to make something that you think somebody's gonna buy, and
right.
and so the kind of the passion and anything genuine that might be in that story is taken out of it because you're trying to force kind of a round peg into a square hole.
Yeah, when I was working at Warner Brothers, I had a friend that was a producer there, James Spatafor, and he was helping me write a script because I never wrote one before. Mm-hmm. And I had this show idea. It was kind of like Friends, but it would be built around the gaming community because, like I said, I'm a gamer. And so I envisioned there would be like a group of friends that worked at this game company at their office. And you have followed these kids making these games week after week because
mm-hmm.
at the time, like making mobile games, like mm-hmm. teenagers were making like millions of dollars just making mobile games out of their house. So I was like, how fun would that be to watch these kids making mobile games on this episodes? And then at the end of that episode, you can actually go to the iOS store and download that game as if they created it. And so that was my spin on it. And then I say maybe after 12 episodes, they were actually working on like this bigger project, which would be like a full like console release, like on Xbox 360 or PS3 or something.
Yeah.
And so Warner Brothers, they're connected with WB Games, of course. And I was doing work with them at the time for like Lego Harry Potter and Lego Batman and stuff.
Right.
And so they agreed to meet me and hear me out on the pitch. And so I pitched it to them. They kind of liked the idea, they had to put their own spin on it and stuff like that to be able to take it to the next step above. And so, I made the adjustments. And then we had an interview with Warner Horizon. And so we went to that interview to pitch the script to them. And they had absolutely no desire in this idea at all. They wanted to talk to us because they were like, after the whole pitch was done, they're like, oh, okay, that's cool. Do you have anything that's like Game of Thrones?
Yes.
And I was like, that's not what I was pitching. I was pitching this,
I know.
This game idea. And it goes to what you were saying. Like, they didn't want anything original. They saw Game of Thrones was making a lot of money. And so they were just like, come talk to us when you have something that's like Game of Thrones. And I was like, well, Game of Thrones is already out there. It's in like season 2 or 3 at this point. Like, why would you want to mimic that? And then next thing, Vikings comes out. That's kind of like Game of Thrones. And they saw that. So that's like everybody really wanted to have a Game of Thrones after that. But the funny part is Nickelodeon, a year after I made that pitch, I'm not going to say that they stole my idea because I never talked to them. But they had a show come out called, I think, Game Changers or Game Shakers, which was the exact idea that I had that I was pitching around. No. So it showed that it was actually a good idea. Like it was the same exact thing. Like the kids would make a game. It came out on a Nickelodeon app store, and it was like the same exact thing. So that was crazy that they wanted something not original. They wanted something that was already guaranteed to make money type thing.
Yeah, and that's honestly, that's very, very typical of the film TV development side of things. I had a writing directing teacher in film school who he was saying that if you're going out to Hollywood and you're going to get into writing and directing and you have a script, make sure you actually have more than one script before you start pitching. Or at least have multiple ideas before you start pitching one idea, because invariably you're almost always going to come across an executive who might not be cool with the idea that you have, but they might be open to hearing something else that you might have, especially if they like you. And he was, because he was saying from personal experience when he was shopping around one of his scripts that exact thing happened to him, and it does actually happen quite frequently, where you will go into a pitch and they'll be like, yeah, I'm not crazy about this. And, so when the exec calls the, agent or whoever it is, that they heard the pitch from, they'll say, we're going to pass on this particular idea, but we're open to hearing anything else that, so-and-so might have. So it's, it's funny that you experience that exact same thing, because it happens all the time, where it's
I had no idea, because I was so passionate about this idea. I thought that this was going to be a home run.
Right.
And then when they're like, what else do you got? I'm like, oh,
exactly. No,
I came in with this one specific thing. I didn't realize you should have more than one show idea.
Yeah, and you're unless you know that that's what's going to happen, you're never going to expect that. And so it's certainly something that nobody necessarily expects is going to happen. But so what? Let's see here. Okay, here we go. So what do you love most about motion graphics, and what do you hate most?
So the reason I took, because when I went to school, the degree was in motion graphics / visual effects. Is that we learned both aspects of it, and I kind of geared more towards motion graphics, because it seemed like it was always going to be something new, because the projects were more short term than VFX. I mean, you could be working on a movie for like years and years before that stuff comes out. So you're looking at the same shots over and over and over again, which gets monotonous. And so I like the idea of motion graphics, where it was a tighter deadline. It seemed like there's always something new to work on, because I don't really like looking at the same thing over and over, just because you start really dreading it, and the ideas just become all mushed together.
It gets flat.
So, yeah, pretty much. And so, like, I noticed for me personally, if I'm looking at the same thing over and over, and I start messing with it too much, you kind of lose that original vision that you had from it. And it's just something that comes out really muddy and not really what you had originally, envisioned whenever you're first going out to create it. So that was the reason I went into the motion graphics path. But one thing that I don't like about motion graphics, I guess, would be sometimes, it depends on the project, but sometimes it could be too many cooks in the kitchen.
Yes.
And so, you come up with these ideas, like, every time you get a new project in, they always say, sky's the limit, think outside the box, do something crazy. So you present that.
It always comes back to the box.
Everybody starts throwing their 2 cents on it, and to the point where it becomes something that's just kind of bland and boring. Yeah. So whenever that stuff happens, I mean, it pays the bills, but you're not too excited to work on it at that point. But,
I saw an Instagram post, was it today or was it yesterday, where it basically was talking about how to work with, or how to deal with that type of a situation where you have so many cooks in the kitchen, and I was kind of like, man, I wish I would have had this 10 years ago, but but that's kind of how I felt about Chris Do in the future too. When I started watching them, I was like, oh man, I wish I would have had this stuff when I started doing motion graphics. So those are definitely good resources to have at the beginning.
I feel like it's stuff that you have to experience as well. Like you can be coached on it, but you really don't know how to handle it till you're thrown in there, because the too many cooks in the kitchen thing was, you're in these briefings, you're in these meetings, you're pitching your style frames, you leave the meeting, but that's when the different people up top start really getting sneaky. So while you're working, they'll come to your desk and they were like, oh yeah, you remember what blah 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 said? I think we should go this direction instead. Oh, yeah. And so you're like, okay, so you start designing in that direction. Then here comes another producer. Oh yeah. It's like, oh yeah, remember what blah blah said? Like, yeah, we're not going for that at all. So you have all these people that keep sneaking up behind you, like whispering in the air what direction you should go to. So by the time you go to the next meeting and you present, you have all these different conflicting ideas in there, and then people are like, hey, that's not what I told you to do, or that's not what I said. And I'll be like, but so and so told me to do this, and then there's inner
And it's so
conflict
hard
there as well.
Yeah. Well, that's just it too. You just mentioned it right there, the conflict, because it's like, you know, you don't want to throw anybody under the bus, but it's like, well, you know, Joe told me to do it, but Kelly said that, you know, that we shouldn't do it. So it's like, you know, that's why it looks the way that it looks. And, you know, so it gets to be very, very challenging when you have so many people giving input on a particular project. So what would you say? What would you say is a project that you're most proud of? And do you have one that you're the least proud of? You don't have to answer that part of it. But what's what's something that you've worked on that you think that you pretty much like the most? I mean, what are you most proud of?
Yeah. So I'll answer the first part. The one I'm most proud of, I would say, will probably be a VR motion graphics music video that I worked on, I think it was 2016 with Mixmaster Mike. And the reason that I'm particularly proud of that one was because, like, years ago when Oculus, before they were bought out by Facebook, they used to actually be based here in Irvine. And I had a friend that was working there. And so he invited my son and I over to go check out what VR was, because at the time it was still kind of a mystery.
Right.
And this is right when the DK2 prototype came out. And he was like, come check this stuff out. You're not going to believe what we're doing here. So once I got the experience, the VR experiences there, we were just kind of blown away. And I said, you know, I want to do some stuff in VR. And at the time, there was a bias towards it saying VR is only going to be for gaming. Nobody else is going to really be able to benefit from this medium. Yeah. And so I kind of took that as a personal challenge. I'm like, why can't I do this? Why can't I use this platform as a motion graphics artist? And they're just like, well, it's going to be only for games. Nobody's going to want to watch any type of, you know, videos or anything. Everybody's going to want to interact. And so I took that as a personal challenge and sought out to really just kind of hone motion graphics or VR. And then long story short, I was able to get in touch with Mixmaster Mike through mutual parties. And he was working on the album at the time. He doesn't like doing anything traditional. He likes to just always kind of, you know, shoot outside the box. And so once I presented the VR idea to him, he kind of just gave me the music and said, go ahead and run with it. And so, at that time, I didn't even know what I was going to do. I was just excited for the opportunity. So, I spent day and night just really trying to figure out how to do VR to begin with, because there was no resources out there. Yeah. And, I think we debuted it at Comic-Con that year. Okay. And I literally got the piece done the day of we were supposed to premiere it, and nobody else had seen it. And we had the booth set up and everything too. Yeah. Because Mixmaster Mike was working on. He did the music for Teen Titans. Okay. And so he was speaking on a panel down there at Comic-Con, and then we had the booth set up, and that's where we were going to premiere the VR experience. And so he didn't even get to see it yet. I just came down with the headsets, and I was just like, all right, I got it done. And he was just like, you know, I trust you. Let's just go with it. So we set up the booth, and the first person that saw it, they, their mouth just dropped. And I wasn't expecting that type of reaction. And we had actually a line going all the way on the show floor, like through Artist Alley and everything, to where the part that some of the show the workers that walk the floor, they broke up our line a couple of times just because, like, everybody wanted to see the VR experience. And so Mike didn't get to see it till the end of the convention because we wanted to let everybody else see it first. And then once he saw it, he was just amazed by it. And, you know, just getting everybody's reaction off of a piece that I had no idea what I was doing going into it. And I was just figuring everything out on the fly. I mean, that was just, you know, great to see. And then from there, I mean, the VR took me like all over the world pretty much. Like, I got to speak in different countries, and I think you went to China to speak, didn't you? Who I was and stuff. So yeah, I mean, that was a big stepping stone for me there. Nice.
What do you consider? What would you consider good motion graphics or good, you know, like 3D animation? Like, what would you consider to be a good graphics package or something like that? I mean, is there something in that stands out to you being like, holy moly, that's amazing?
It's tough these days just because we've been around so much and we've seen so much, and it's almost like everything is a remix at this point. Right. And so, like, I was just even looking at Instagram, and like I spoke on a panel last night, we were talking about like the younger generation of artists coming up, and that got me thinking like maybe I should start checking out some more work. And
right.
it just seems like everybody's just kind of recycling the same stuff that's going on. Like I know a lot of people are influenced by Beeple, so we're seeing that.
I was just going to bring his name up. Yeah,
just really being out there. And then on the professional side, it's like everything is kind of looking the same.
Right.
There hasn't been. I'm trying to think of the last time I was just wowed. I mean, maybe like a big studio, like a full-length motion picture, like Frozen 2 was pretty good. Like, I mean, that's not really motion graphics, but just like
more
the
3D animation.
The particle effects and everything that was done there. I mean, it's like that type of stuff is amazing. Or even, I know a lot of people had critics about it, but I mean, I really liked The Lion King and how that was pushing CG. I mean, I didn't realize that 100% of that movie was CG.
I know.
And so, yeah, I mean, that was amazing in itself because you would never, I mean, some of the animals you could tell were CG, but the landscape of how they brought together Africa there, I mean, that looked total photo real, like you couldn't tell.
And I realize it's a little bit of a hard question to answer because, you know, when you're talking about motion graphics, you're talking about design, and design can be so subjective in terms of what it's servicing, and that's, you know, and that's ultimately kind of, you know, the true test of any kind of design is it properly serving the purpose of what you need it for? Is it serving the purpose of, you know, doing the infographic or whatever you're doing? Is it getting the message across? But I like how you took it there with 3D animation and CGI, because that's been the thing that's blown me away a lot recently as well too, is just seeing how far, whether it's Unreal Engine or Mandalorian used Unreal Engine in its virtual sets and stuff like that. But you mentioned Lion King. One of the ones that blew me away was Toy Story 4. You know,
that one too.
I knew that was a 3D animated movie. I obviously have seen all the other, you know, but there were some scenes that looked so photoreal. It was like I was blown away. I couldn't believe it.
Like I went to the Pixar event last year at SIGGRAPH. They did a Pixar event.
I remember you telling me.
Yeah, they went over a lot of the technical aspects of creating Toy Story 4. Like, there was no matte paintings in that movie at all. Everything was 100% CG. So even for like the really wide landscape shots that you would see of like that carnival that was there, they're like every single light bulb on every single ride was an actual light bulb that was modeled out and textured properly. And then every single blade of grass, even if you didn't see it, just because of the way that the blade of grass would have, you know, affect the blade of grass beside it because of the shadowing and the translucency. Like every blade of grass was an actual piece of geometry, and, you know, dust particles were actually real dust. It's not just something that was slapped on over top. Like they went as real as you could get with it. Remember inside the antique store, how they had all the spider webs in there? They actually created an AI spider and they let it run loose in the I think they said for like a day. Like they were able to simulate how a spider would run through the antique store for like years and years and years just to accumulate all that dust and the spider webs and the debris and all that different stuff. So they went like as far as they could with it just to bring up that photorealism of, you know, how the dust and the spider webs and everything would look in there, which is, you know, a lot of that attention to detail not many people really go to.
Right. Yes. Well, I mean, but also too, there's not really a lot of people who can afford to do that kind of attention to detail. You know, I mean, Pixar being its own, you know, studio in and of itself, they control their budget 100%. I mean, now they're owned by Disney as well too. So, you know, they have their own taskmaster, if you will, to answer to. But I think all of those little details, whether you see them or not, add to the realism of everything. And you know, same thing with, you know, the trailer for Unreal Engine 5. I mean, I can't imagine the computing power that it would take to create just even one frame of Toy Story 4 or whatever it is. But now now we go into Unreal Engine where, you know, you're essentially real-time rendering on the fly, and it blows me away that the ability to be able to do that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I would like, I know we kind of went off into a different direction with like
We did.
3D and stuff, and that kind of steers away from motion graphics, but it also brings it to the point of like, what is the definition of motion graphics these days? Because it just seems to kind of cover like a whole spectrum of different mediums at this point. Like, there's not really no hard cut definition of it. Like, when people ask what you do, I used to say motion graphics, but it's so generic of a term now. It's kind of hard to explain exactly what you do.
It is.
When they ask like, what's motion graphics? And I'm just like, it always stumps me because I'm just like, how do I explain what I do, you know?
Well, the other part of it too, like whenever I say, motion graphics and 3D animation, everybody almost kind of transfixes on the 3D animation aspect of it. And so immediately most people also think Toy Story. It's like, oh, what kind of 3D, have I seen your work? What kind of 3D stuff do you do? And I'm like, well, and I always have to kind of clarify, well, I don't work at Pixar or Disney or anything like that. So, no, you would not have seen anything that I've done. Although it's funny, I did do kind of a spec Toy Story animation for a tutorial that I did on my YouTube channel that I ended up putting that up on my reel, and that actually was the animation that got me a job end of last year, where they're like, so did they asked me in the interview, so Disney gave you those assets to play with? And I'm like, no, actually I created that all, that was all me. And they were like, that's all we need to know. You're hired. I mean, I was like, and so that kind of just goes to show you that sometimes putting something on your reel that you might not necessarily think that you're going to put on your reel can actually help you get something. Going back to something that you were talking about with your project with Mixmaster Mike, that actually is kind of a good segue into another question I had, because you specifically said when you started that project that you didn't know what you were going to do. So how do you find inspiration? So when you get a job, whether it's for Discovery Channel or Warner Brothers or whatever it is, now actually that's probably not a good example, because in those particular instances you might have assets to already play with and kind of literally just animating certain things and whatnot. But if you get a job where there's zero, there's nothing there, and you have to come up with a concept yourself, how do you go about finding inspiration? Yeah,
usually the technology is my, I guess that's like my striving force. Like, I know a lot of people look to different artists for inspiration, but for me, I've always been like, I'm surprised I didn't end up being an engineer, because I like going in and just like tinkering with different technology. Yeah. And so it's like with the VR thing, it's like that technology intrigued me, and I was just, focused on making it work for what I'm able to do, like use my skill sets towards that. And then it's the same thing with Unreal. Like, I mean, my electric bill here just is always through the roof because I'm using Octane or Redshift. Yeah. I have several computers here with a ton of GPUs. And I mean, those are good renders. But once I think Capacity did a talk last year at SIGGRAPH about how they were utilizing Unreal Engine for a lot of their renders and stuff like that. And so that kind of got me intrigued into it. But then once Maxon made that announcement that they had integration with Unreal to the Dynasmith plugin, that's when I downloaded it immediately, because I mean, at first I thought, oh, okay, I could just take my scenes from Cinema into Unreal, render it out real time, and call it a day. And that's not really the case at all. But the more I started playing around with it and really understanding the workflow, I mean, that's what really got my mind going. And now it's like I'm utilizing real-time technology for my client projects today. And so that's kind of like been my inspiration, is just really, any type of new tech that comes out, I'm always trying to figure out how I can use that to make my life easier and work faster. And when you can work faster, you can be more creative, because you can start putting more attention to detail into your work. Like before, I would have to cut a lot of corners because I know I'd have to render overnight and then composite everything the next day. And then there's always some type of hiccup, over whenever you render like a big render like that. And so I would spend most of the day trying to band-aid it or find quick turnaround or cut ways so I don't have to re-render that whole thing. But it's like when I did NAB Live, that for SIGGRAPH for Maxon this year, I did, that was what, like a 15-20 second, no, I think it was a 30-second show open. I literally rendered that 4K so I rendered that whole 4K
right.
and 60 FPS within a matter of seconds. Like each scene probably took me maybe like 2 seconds, and I'm just
right.
working off of one 2080 Ti here.
Wow.
And so that was like I've always tinkered around with Unreal, and I've been doing the
right.
tutorials, but that was like my first like actual client project that I got to really utilize it with. And so I learned a lot there. And then from there, I showed you the stuff I did for Grant Boxing the other day.
Yeah.
I mean, that was just a logo animation.
Oh, it looked amazing. It was gorgeous. It was gorgeous.
I mean, yeah, I did that 4K 24 FPS, but I rendered that in like 2 seconds, and I just set all my stuff up in Cinema, brought it into Unreal, textured it up, and then call it a day. So it's like I'm getting better at that, and so it's kind of like, you know, after I start getting really good with Unreal, I'll probably be looking for the next thing, you know.
Right.
Since technology is just always moving forward. So
do you have to when you say you get everything set up in Cinema 4D, do you get just the geometry and the animation set up in Cinema 4D, and then you worry about the texturing in Unreal?
Yeah, so I'll set up basic texturing inside of Cinema 4D. Like, I guess I could say it. I'm working on the next season of Alaskan Bush People for Discovery Channel.
Okay.
So I'm going to be doing some CG explainer graphics for that. And if you've been to my website, you see any of my work that I've done for, like, let's say Alaska: The Last Frontier or Bering Seagull, like those type of CG explainers where they're like they're talking about stuff that they're building, like, we built a log cabin on the outskirts of Alaska, and you know, I have to build like a whole environment and show like the cabin being built up. So I'm going to be doing similar stuff like that. But in the past, that usually took me a really long time to render out. Like, you know, I use Redshift, it looks good. But for this go around, I'm going to be using Unreal. And so to get to your question, I've been setting everything up in Cinema 4D. And like, I mean, just because I've been doing this stuff for so long, I kind of know what the texturing is going to look like. And so I won't even texture it in Cinema. Like, I'll use just like flat colors, like brown for the wood and green for the grass. In that way, once I bring it into Unreal, I know what correlates with what material, if that makes sense. So then I can use I'll use a lot of Megascans materials because theirs are already set up. Yeah. So it's like if I need grass, I go to Megascans, bring the grass over, and then I'll just replace that texture. Makes sense. And same thing with the wood logs and everything of that nature. So it's just like really coming up with that workflow. But it's been a lot of experimenting as well. Yeah,
your work has actually been essentially kind of the driving factor for me wanting to get into Unreal. Is, you know, because I remember when I was at SIGGRAPH with you, you know, last year, and I remember being there just feeling completely overwhelmed, seeing Unreal, seeing you render, seeing what was the other Unity. I'm like, I don't know what any of these things are. They all seem to do the same thing, and it's like I'm just gonna stick with Octane, and because I know it, and because I can pound things out quickly. I probably shouldn't use the word pound, but I can knock things out pretty quickly, you know, in that regard. But at the same time too, seeing the quality of the things that you're doing, as well as, you know, some of the applications like Mandalorian and various different other things too, my mind is kind of, you know, swimming with all kinds of ideas of things that I can do with it and that I should be doing with it. And I unfortunately have been, you know, kind of bogged down with a lot of other things that are kind of taking my focus away from sitting down and playing around with it. And my other hesitancy as well too, and you know, this kind of goes back to something we were talking about earlier in terms of making sure that you know what you want to do before you get into this business. I don't really want to be the Unreal guy, you know, especially considering that you're much better at that than I am. And, you know, so that I'm more than happy that you have kind of taken that space and run with it, because you know you're perfect for it, you're great for it, and I'm not you, and so I'm trying to figure out, it's like, well, how much time do I invest in playing around with this to kind of figure out what I need to do and what I want to do, but at the same time too, I realize, man, there are some really good storytelling possibilities that I have with this tool. I really should take the time and sit down and play around with it. But, you know, like, you know, we've talked about this before too. It's a double-edged sword. It's like, I don't want people coming for me for Unreal jobs where I'm like, I don't really want to do that stuff. But at the same time too, I don't know, maybe it's a revenue source that I should look into.
I would say, don't look at it as becoming like the Unreal guy. Look at it as into how can you utilize this to make your life easier.
You're right.
So, like I think I alluded to it earlier, like my electric bill was always through the roof. I was always getting those graphs from the electric company, like here's how much power your neighbors are using, and then here's how much power you're using. And it's like, we're like triple the amount of wattage that we're using from our neighbors. I don't know how true that is, but I noticed that ever since I haven't been having to use so many computers to render with, my electricity bill came down. So that was, that's a big plus there.
My wife would like to hear that.
And then on top of that, my render times are down. So like I'm saying, if I see an error, I can quickly change that and fix that on the fly. Right. But I would just say, it's not even going out and looking for jobs in Unreal. Right. I'm just like when the clients ask me for a job, they don't even ask me what I'm using. They just want to see the end result. So they can really care less if I'm using Microsoft Paint, as long as it looks good at the end of the day, and I'm not, taking years to get it done. That's all they really care about. It's the bottom line of the dollar. So just utilize it to make yourself or your life easier. If you are interested in using Unreal, don't just, if you have a client project, just don't right off the bat think, oh, I'm just going to use Unreal and dive into it. Because I have been getting a lot of emails from people that are like, I have this client project, I'm on a deadline, I can't just bring in my Cinema 4D file and just hit render. And I'm like, you have to kind of understand the application. It's not just drop it in and hit render and call it a day. I'm like, there are layers to it. You have to really understand how each application works with each other. I mean, it's the same thing if you're using Maya or Modo or anything else.
Like, and I think that's probably my hesitancy in using it on a client project is, knowing that it's not going to be something as simple as literally transferring the geo over to Unreal and texturing it and all that kind of stuff. I know there's going to be, a lot of work that's going to be involved in that regard. Excuse me. Yeah, I got hiccups. But
so I did the same thing whenever, like, I was starting to work in Redshift, but I didn't take on the client. Like, I didn't just straight on use it in a client project until I was familiar with it and I understood it to the point to where I was comfortable in using it in a client project, because I didn't want to get stuck and then have this deadline looming over me. It's like I can't figure out what's going on. So anytime I do learn new software, I kind of give myself personal projects first, just to get myself really adapted to it. And then once I feel comfortable, then I'll start using it in my, my client applications.
Yeah. I think for me, it's more of a time issue. There are so many things that I want to do, or there are so many other. It feels like it's one of those other things where it's also one of the reasons why I don't really do a lot of beta testing as much as I used to, because it's added time, to playing around with this new thing or that new thing, and again, like I said, it's like I've this particular interview, I've got to cut this together, I've got to make it all, I've got to put it all together, I got to get it up, I got to do that. I've also got a tutorial that's in the pipeline that's got to get up. I was going to get that up today, but now I have to push that to the next day. So there's a limited amount of time in each and every day that I have to invest in doing various different things, and I have to pick and choose what to cross off of that list. And so that's kind of that's been my only hesitancy about jumping into Unreal. I have Mixer, I have Megascans. Mixer is another one. I really want to learn Mixer because just the power of being able to create some textures and stuff like that is exciting to me, and I want to be able to play around with that. So I actually am planning on playing around with Mixer before I actually even get into Unreal. But your work, every time I see something new that you've done, I'm just like, man, I really need to get into Unreal. I really, really do. So that actually kind of leads me into kind of the next couple of questions, which are basically kind of the same question. So if somebody wants to get into motion graphics or 3D animation or CG or anything like that, what kind of advice? Do you have any advice that you can give to somebody who's looking to get into doing what you do?
Yeah, so the same, you can't take the same steps that I took because that was way back 2006, 2007.
True.
We're in a whole different world these days. Like
Yes.
social media wasn't as prevalent back then
Correct.
as it is now.
Correct.
And so now I would tell people definitely keep putting your stuff out there.
Yeah.
I know a lot of artists are introverts, but you have to put yourself out there because if you're not putting yourself out there, how are people going to even be able to see you, to recommend you for jobs? Because recommendations go a long way.
Yes.
Like there's a lot of artists out there, a lot more now than when I first started.
Yes.
And so you're competing against all these people around the world. And so if you could go to these events, talk to some of the veterans, network a little bit, and then once they get to know you and know your work, then they can actually vouch for you for if you go to apply at different studios. And if they have a relationship there, they can say, oh yeah, Joe, I met him the other night. He seems like a stand-up guy. Yeah, I'll give him a shot, maybe in the junior position or something like that. Yeah. And then that goes a lot further than you just cold calling or cold emailing because a lot of these studios are getting bombarded with artists every day. So you have to do different things to, make yourself stand out.
Right. Well, and I would say too, the cost of entry is a lot less than it used to be. When you and I were starting out, I mean, I didn't learn Avid in film school, but the Avid class, the Avid Bay in that they had in film school was $200,000 edit bay. And no, probably was more than that at the time because now, even now it's, $10,000, $20,000 for, a powerful Avid edit bay. So the cost of entry is a lot less than it used to be. But at the same time too, now with YouTube, getting somebody's attention is a lot easier than it used to be as well too. And you have all of your studios, all production companies, they're all looking at YouTube. They're all looking for the next big thing anyway. So
you'd be amazed at how many people have been hitting me up just from doing YouTube the past year. Like I didn't realize it was that monumental. Like I didn't know it had that much of an influence in the field. Because I'm surprised a lot more artists aren't really doing it. And once I started getting the influx of emails and just people that are interested, I was like, I should have started doing this years ago. I've always been hesitant about doing it, but now that I did it, I wish that I would have really did it years ago.
Yeah. Well, you and I have talked about this as well too, because you and I both basically had the same kind of thought process and mindset, earlier on when we should have been doing it is, YouTube is just a fad. It's not really a thing, and, we either let people talk us out of it or we kind of talked ourselves out of doing anything on YouTube because it wasn't, it wasn't a professional thing. I mean, even the whole Vimeo versus YouTube thing. I mean, people were putting things up on Vimeo versus YouTube because Vimeo had this mystique of being, professional, whereas YouTube that's where all the influencer, amateur people put their stuff. And so it wasn't really looked at with any kind of a serious thought process than it, at least it has been for both you and I in the last couple of years. I mean, this is a serious thing that has serious potential to essentially take you out of having to do client work and various different other things and stuff like that. I mean, I'll still do client work because I enjoy the challenge that comes with each and every client project, but I also feel like it informs kind of my creativity, my ability to be able to do things. So
and you never know who's watching either. Like I started that Discord channel maybe a week or two ago.
Right.
And people have been seeing it on there, like Deadmau5 out of nowhere hit me up through YouTube, and he emailed me. He's just like, hey, I've been watching your stuff on YouTube, and then he's like, do you have Discord? And I was like, yeah, I actually just started a Discord channel, and he's been active in the community. And
he has been. I know.
And then last night I was talking to somebody they left a comment on one of my videos. Yeah. And so I answered their comment. They're like, oh yeah, thanks for getting back to me so quick. By the way, are you on Discord? And I was like, yeah, I have a Discord channel. Right. There's a lot of other artists on there. We're all helping each other out. So he joins it, and he's actually from the UK, but he's a music producer over in the UK, and he works with all these artists that I've known over there, like Dizzy Rascal and Wally and Freedon and stuff like that. So we started talking about all that stuff. Because I was like, oh yeah, I'm a big Wally fan. I've been listening to ground music since I was a kid. And he sends me over a track. He's like, yeah, I was just with Wally yesterday. Here's a new song that we just produced. And I'm just like, so it's just crazy that the different types of people that will find you on YouTube.
Right, exactly.
You never know who's watching out there as well. So that's been a wild experience in itself. That's
true. I wholeheartedly agree with you. So where do you see yourself or the industry in, well, actually, this actually is the last two questions I will say. Where do you see yourself in 10 years? And also, too, with everything that has gone on with COVID-19 and all the other things, where do you see the industry in 10 years? Like, how do you see things advancing, with the need for social distancing, for wearing masks and all this kind of stuff? I mean, how do you see any of that kind of moving forward in terms of how the industry is going to play out?
Yeah, I mean, I have hopes that will die out this year. I hope that's not going to be the new normal. But I also know that the studios have been looking into maybe doing some type of virtual production. VFX artists are going to be more in demand now than ever. Okay. Because of the social distancing, they're trying to figure out ways to maybe how you can film a crowd on green screen or make a CG crowd. Right. Because they don't want to hire background actors because usually they're real close to each other. Yep. So they're trying to figure out how they could just composite people in there. Mm-hmm. And then a lot of people have been talking about the virtual production stuff with Unreal just because, I mean, everybody always brings up The Mandalorian, but I mean, that was the first example to really take it mainstream with. You build out your scenes in Unreal, you have that stuff playing in real time in the background, and you're not using green screens, and you can kind of, see in camera everything that's going on instead of waiting later to, fix it in post or composite it out in post. So I know that's been the talk of a lot of production right now on how to utilize that type of stuff. But I think VFX artists in particular are going to be really in high demand these next couple of years just because of the way that the state of the industry is going.
Okay, yeah, I would agree with you on that. And it's funny you mentioned Mandalorian too. It was something I was thinking about. I was glad that I didn't know anything about how it was made until after I watched it.
Yeah.
Because I mean, I think it blew my mind that much more after the fact when I realized, holy moly, that stuff was that was virtual LED sets. What?
Yeah.
So
I think Disney Plus, I think they just put out a whole series.
I think they
strictly
did.
BTS on it. Yeah, I haven't had a chance to watch it.
I haven't had a chance to watch it either, but I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's all I have right now. Is there anything you wanted to add? Do you want to say anything? Do you want to tell any funny stories? Do you want to dance? Do you want to, play video games in the background? I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I got stories for days. How much time do you got?
Well, considering how quickly the batteries die, I don't probably think I have that much time.
Yeah, but I mean, if I could plug some of the stuff that I'm working on.
Yeah, no, totally, absolutely.
Yeah, so we've been talking about Unreal Engine this whole entire interview, and so I am working on a motion graphics guide to Unreal Engine course. It will be a paid course that's going to be distributed through millgraph.com.
Okay.
And then I'm also going to be doing
is there a place? Is there a place? If people wanted to get notified of when that comes out, is there a place that they can go for that?
Yeah, if you go to millgraph.com and then go to the courses panel, we have a page set up there, and we're not taking pre-orders because I don't know. I'm aiming to have it done here within the next month. Okay. But you could get, you can sign up for the mailing list so that you'll automatically be notified whenever it starts out. And then I'm also working on a mini series through School of Motion. And so I'm going to have an introduction to Unreal Engine through School of Motion. It's not going to be as in depth as the course that I'm going to have up for sale. It's going to be more of just kind of an entry point, for people that are intrigued. These are the studios that have been using it. I've been talking to the guys over at Capacity, so they gave me permission to kind of use some of their works just to showcase, how they're using it and stuff like that. So that's going to be coming out.
I like Ellery over there. Ellery runs that place, or I think him and his wife are the ones who are the founders of them. Really great people.
So, hopefully I do some stuff with those guys because Ellery seemed interested once he found out I was using Unreal Engine. He's like, we should collab sometime. So I'm like,
I didn't realize that they had switched to Unreal because I knew that they were using Octane as their main render engine. So I didn't know. I think I'd heard you mention their work on Rocket League, on something else. I don't know if we were having a conversation but yeah, so that's exciting. I'm a huge fan of Capacity's work. I love their stuff and everything that they do. I think they're one of the best design houses out there.
Yeah, I mean, they're the ones that actually got me really interested in it years ago. They did the broadcast package for the Pro Max games.
Yes.
And they were probably the very first studio I see utilize real-time rendering for that package. And so they almost made like a mini video game to be able to play out their renders in real time and everything.
I think I know what you're talking about, yeah.
Yeah, that piece was amazing. And then from there, they did Rocket League, they did Forza, they did Magic the Gathering. I mean, if you go to their site, you can see all the stuff they've been doing, but they've been really pushing the envelope for, and this is before Unreal was even making a push for Hollywood. Like back when they started, it was strictly a game engine. So they were ahead of the curve even back then. So yeah, a lot of the stuff they do, and I really look up to what they're doing. But
I mean they're one of the few sites, they're one of the few companies that I go to. They're kind of one of my go-to kind of inspiration type places. Is just looking to see if there's anything on there that might inspire an idea that I have on something I might be working on or whatever it is. So I'm a big fan of that. Was there anything else?
Oh, yeah, and then just the stuff that I'm doing on YouTube. If you go to youtube.com/Jonathan Winbush, I try to put up weekly tutorials there as well. And so if you subscribe there, you'll be notified. I think you have to click the bell still or something like that, right? To be able to get the email or notification. Yeah. But yeah, every sub helps. So even if you do watch the tutorial, if you hit that subscription button, that's a big help just to push those numbers up and get me even more,
and I'll put
exposure out there.
And I'll put links in the description below for MoGraph.com, School of Motion. Does School of Motion have an email list that I mean, I know they have an email list. I'm on their email list, on their newsletter, I should say. And then I'll also put, obviously, your channel in the description below as well, too, as well as a graphic that will be up somewhere showing who Jonathan Winbush is. But yeah, no, I thank you so much for doing this. And I'm looking at the clock, and we've almost been doing this for an hour and a half. So
crazy. Yeah, time keeps going by fast.
Yeah, it does. So I absolutely appreciate everything that you do, and I thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to spend some time with me.
Yeah, appreciate it, man. Thank you.
All right, thanks.
All right, take care.